these words: "Our priority is preserving the dignity of the 39 people who've died and ensuring we get answers for their loved ones." These were the words of the Deputy Chief Constable of Essex as that force began its biggest ever murder inquiry. The refrigerated container was today moved to Tilbury docks, and the post-mortems and forensics on the 8 women and 31 men are beginning. At the same time, the National Crime Agency and its European counterparts are investigating the route of the container through Europe and the involvement, possibly, of people smugglers in this tragedy. As for the truck driver from Northern Ireland, the police have been given a further 24 hours to question him on suspicion of murder. Well, joining me now is one of Britain's top forensic pathologists, Dr. Richard Shepherd. He's worked on the Marchioness disaster, the 7/7 bombings and the inquiry into Princess Diana's death. Now, some of our conversation may be disturbing to viewers. Dr. Shepherd, thank you very much for joining us.
Okay.
How do you begin with these postmortems if it was you? What happens?
It is a very slow, organised process that is practised, but it is the first step is going to be recovering the bodies from the container and taking them, and we know, I think 8 bodies have been recovered back to the hospital mortuary now, so they're beginning the process. And once the bodies are there, then it is a meticulous examination, starting with looking externally. What clothes are they wearing? Is there any jewellery that might identify them?
Any tattoos?
Any tattoos? Are there any documents? Are there passports?
Yeah.
As happened in 2000, there were the individuals in that particular container had their passports on them, which made identification so much easier. Now, often the passports and all forms of documentation are jettisoned, making these people nameless and stateless. And if that's happened, it's going to be so difficult to establish who they are.
You're also presumably, as a forensic pathologist, looking for signs of what has perhaps been going on prior to them being in that container.
Very, very certainly. It's obviously how and why they've died are going to be crucial points, but it has to be wider than that. Have these people been tortured? Have they been sexually assaulted? Have they been beaten and forced in? What has happened to them prior to getting into the container is going to be as important, and there may be clues in what has happened to them, where they have come from and how they followed the chain. And indeed, what has happened to them in the container. Have they been alive and attempting to escape? That's going to be an important feature too. Yes,
because we know, and it is an awful thing to think about, but we know apparently in 2000 there was this attempt, this banging, this scraping to get out. And of course, as you said, there were some evidence-based things in 2000, but there was also 2 survivors.
There were, and that would have given the police in Kent then a huge impetus to solving who the identities of these people. We don't have that on this occasion.
How hard? Now, we think, but we've had absolutely no absolute confirmation. I'm not sure how we would get the confirmation at this stage that these are Chinese nationals. But just let's say they're Chinese nationals. Just let's say they come from a regime, perhaps, where even the very fact of their escape is problematic for the family. If somebody's missing, it's not necessarily the case that with deaths, the relatives would necessarily want to come forward.
Well, I could conceive of a situation in a state where there may be retribution to the relatives for people who've escaped and managed to get to England, although they've died. Those relatives are not going to be volunteering to help with the investigation, to give DNA, to recognise photographs.
Or may not be allowed to.
Or indeed may not be allowed to, as you would expect to happen in almost any other transportation disaster. People will be fighting and struggling to give that information. Here it may be withheld.
It may be with, and also, I wonder what you think of the role of the Chinese state, who say, of course, that they're coming forward to help.
I think as a pathologist I have no view on the Chinese state. I know what Interpol and our police procedures would be. Once we have leads, they would try and follow them up, and we hope that the state, for the relatives, would give and assist in any way they possibly could.
We also know that very, very sadly, for example, the King's Cross disaster, which was in 1987, that the final identification of one person wasn't made till 2004.
Yes, that's right.
So during all this time, do forensic pathologists return to it, or once you've made your assessment, or are there other things that come up that may actually occasion a return to the mortuary?
No, the forensic pathologists will complete their work. the photographs will be taken, the odontologist will look at the teeth, we'll have all the photographs we need. The legwork is going to be done by the police officers from Essex Police, Europe and Interpol.
So we know now that for all the rescue services that were there, from the work that you do and other forensic pathologists, which is very, very distressing, and also the discussion now being more open, that actually people, and this would be the case in Lockerbie, where there were people combing the hills in Lockerbie, but it wasn't recognised that they would need help to deal with it. But PTSD is a very definite thing, I imagine, for forensic pathologists too.
Indeed it is. It's something that I suffered from towards the end of my career. But also we are realising it now, and there's a big pressure for all doctors, but forensic pathologists who are thought to be an extent hardened against this sort of thing, to seek help and to get the support they need. But everyone who's involved, the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition mentioned the fire brigade and the police services, to which I'd add my colleagues, my forensic pathology colleagues and the mortuary staff, who are working right at the coalface of having to manage these 38 people.
Dr. Thank you so much for joining us.